In Chapter 24, we're going to continue with our chromosomal bases of inheritance, and we're going to look at some of the disorders caused by genetic abnormalities. We're going to start with sex-linked inheritance, and we talked about this in Chapter 23 some, but normally both males and females have 23 pair of chromosomes. 22 pair of those we refer to as autosomes. Those are the body chromosomes, and 1 pair is the sex chromosomes. So we have 23 pair total. Males are XY, females are XX. We both get X's. Both of those come from mom and dad. Mom gives the X for the males. Dad can only give a Y for the males. Sex-linked traits are controlled by genes on the sex chromosomes. You notice the difference in size here in this picture as well. This is XX, this is an X, and this is a Y, and Y is very minimal compared to the size of an X chromosome. X-linked are found on the X chromosome. Most sex-linked traits are like this. They have no matching gene on the Y because we don't have as much DNA comprising the Y chromosome. Y-linked are found on the Y chromosome only. Most X-linked traits are recessive. The females have to have 2 copies of those alleles, 1 from each parent. The males will inherit the X from its mother, but the Y from the father isn't going to carry an allele for the trait. And in this example, we have a non-carrier mother and an affected father. And remember, dad can only give Y's to the boys, and he gives X's to the girls. So the only X he can give is an affected X. The girls don't appear to have this. They're carriers, but they don't appear to have this disorder because they got a copy of a good gene from mom, or the one that's going to be dominant in this case and cover it up. So they're carriers. They're not affected, and neither one of the boys are carriers or affected because they got the Y gene from dad. Sex-linked alleles. Examples: red-green color blindness. This is a well-known X-linked recessive disorder. Females are carriers and are capable of passing on the recessive allele. Colorblind males are more common than colorblind females. And this is because it only takes 1 copy of the gene to see the disorder in males because they only have 1 shot at that gene. The Y doesn't carry it, just the X. So a male who's colorblind is going to have the recessive allele. The male who's not colorblind or has normal vision has the dominant allele. It takes 2 copies of that recessive gene to get allele to have a female who's colorblind. So a female who has at least 1 copy of the dominant gene is going to appear to have normal colored vision. And here we see just the Punnett square showing this trait being carried on. We have a male here who has normal vision, and we have a female who's a carrier. And you notice when we look at her offspring, the possible offspring of these two, all of the girls are going to have normal vision, and half of the boys will have normal vision. So this mom's got a 50% chance of passing on this affected gene, but it's only going to show up in her males in this case. Most sex-linked disorders are carriers on the X chromosome. X-linked recessive disorders, more males than females are going to have the disorder. The recessive allele on X is always expressed in males because there's only 1 copy of it. An X-linked dominant disorder, there's only very few of those that are known. This is affected, the affected males pass the trait on only to the daughters. Females can pass the trait on to both sons and daughters. So here we have an example of color blindness again, and we're looking at a pedigree, and we see the genotypes as well as the pedigrees, how they're related to each other. So the grandfather is colorblind, and the grandfather passed on the ability to carry or to pass on the color blindness to his granddaughter. Here's the X with the affected gene, and that means one of the grandsons ends up with color blindness because of the 50-50 chance of passing that gene on to the male offspring. And over here we have a female who is colorblind, so she has 2 recessive genes. That means that every one of her sons is going to be colorblind because they're going to get the affected allele for colorblindness from mom, and dad only provides the Y that has no allele for colorblindness. So X-linked recessive disorders, red-green colorblindness. Now if you've gone and had a vision test done, you've had these pictures put in front of you before, and if you're colorblind, this shouldn't be a problem. If you are, it kind of blends together and you don't see the difference. So we have brown on the outside, and we have a green figure 8 right here in the middle. If you can't see that, you're colorblind. We have gray here, and we have red here. So the red is a 3 and an 8, but you notice here this is green. So if you see red and green the same color, this looks like an 88 instead of a 38 in red. Here we have pink and red dots, and this is kind of a aqua color. We have the number 1 here and the number 5 here, and this is a little bit darker in greens than what this is up here. So these are the colorblind tests that you would look at to see if you do exhibit color blindness. Let's look at another disorder, Duchenne muscular dystrophy. This is characterized by the wasting away of muscles, and if you watch the telethon in September during Labor Day weekend, it used to be called the Jerry Lewis Telethon, and it's for muscular dystrophy research. One of the most common ones that they talk about is Duchenne's muscular dystrophy. It's characterized by the wasting away, and it's the absence of a protein called dystrophin. And that causes the belly to stick out, the legs to be thin, and especially the thighs in particular, poor balance, awkward and clumsy, weak muscles in the front of the leg causing foot drop, a tight heel cord, and may cause the child to walk on their toes. They'll have a thick lower leg muscle, and the muscle isn't really muscle, it's mostly fat. The knees may bend back, and that's to shift the weight. The buttocks are weak, and the hip straighteners are weak. The back will sway in, and the shoulders and arms are held back at an awkward angle in order to try to balance them while they walk. And this is just the physical attributes of what Duchenne muscular dystrophy would look like. So let's look at what happens on the tissue level. This is normal muscle tissue. You notice the cells are packed closely together. Look at the difference in the abnormal muscle tissue. So we see this fibrous tissue that's formed between the cells. In the presence of that fibrous tissue between the muscle cells, you can see the drastic difference as to why there would be an issue with muscle development with Duchenne's muscular dystrophy. Let's look at Fragile X syndrome. Fragile X syndrome is the most common cause of inherited mental impairment. It's the most common known cause of autism, and its mutated gene is unable to produce enough of a protein that is needed for the body's cells, especially the brain cells, to develop and function normally. Back to that one real quick. You notice that the elongated face that you see in both of the affected children, this is their infant pictures and then the adult pictures. So there's a look to their face, kind of like when you look at someone who has Down syndrome and you notice certain things like they have the Mongolian shaped eyes, they have a thickened, shortened tongue, they have a short, fat face compared to what someone their age would have. So there's drastic differences with these genetic disorders just in physical features alone. Another one that we've already talked about is hemophilia. This is the absence or minimal presence of a clotting factor, and missing that clotting factor can be detrimental to your health because you could bleed out and not have the ability to clot to stop you from bleeding. But due to biotechnology and changes in biotechnology products, we now have a clotting factor that can be taken so that the individual doesn't necessarily have to have a blood transfusion, which is what they had before. And that blood transfusion is where we first realized that the HIV virus could be in blood and transfused from one person to another through blood samples. So then now we test for or screen blood for the HIV virus before it's transmitted. And you're familiar with this. We've looked at Queen Victoria and Prince Albert and how it's affected their family line, especially because they are royalty and they tend to breed within the family line, which we see that recessive disorder, that sex-linked disorder come up more often because of that. So that's going to conclude the first section. In order to get information about sex-linked disorders down, we're going to do a virtual lab, and that'll be done during class time over the next day. And if you don't get it finished, it's considered homework.